So, one question that I'm sure a lot of fans have always been curious about is why doesn't Tony Khan put AEW Dynamite and AEW Rampage head to head with Raw and Smackdown? I mean, you would think that with the way sometimes, if not a majority of the times, depending on your point of view, how Raw and Smackdown are presented, that going up against them, Rampage and Dynamite, I should say, would instantly steamroll over them, right? You would think it would be a no-brainer that Dynamite and Rampage would be the better, show. They would get the higher ratings. They would get the most viewership. So, with all that said, and the momentum that obviously AEW, has right now in the eyes of many fans, including not just the very faithful AEW fans, but the overall wrestling fans in general, even those that are fans of WWE as well. You have to wonder, why hasn't Tony Khan, taken advantage of this? Why hasn't he decided, hey, I'm confident in my product so much, I want to finally decide to go head-to-head with Raw, or I want to finally go head-to-head with Smackdown? Well, it's real simple. Because of the fact that at the end of the day, I believe everybody realizes, I should say, and Tony Khan realizes this as well, that, at the end of the day, despite having a more superior product, there's no way they beat WWE. There's no way. And one of the major factors is because WWE is still a more established product than All Elite Wrestling. All Elite Wrestling right now is going into its third year, or has begun going into its third year, per se. And even though they have all this momentum, they signed all this talent, numbers are on the uprise, if you will, at most times, they realize, that being Tony Khan, that, along with other, fans and, even people in the business, realize that at the end of the day, despite everything being in their favor, there's no way they'd be able to, beat WWE. There's no way. End of discussion. Because when you think about it, there's been a lot of promotions, most notably WCW, and for a time TNA, that went up against WWE on Monday nights and even Thursday nights. And basically, despite having the better product, if you will, if not the more edgier product, more fan-oriented product, if I can say that for a company like TNA/Impact, WWE still beat them. They did. I mean, let's not forget that Monday night debut for Impact going up against Raw. Impact had Hogan debut, WWE had Bret Hart debut, and at the end of the day, despite maybe Impact having the better product, despite it kind of being, I guess you could say, a temporary conclusion to the Hulkamania tour that they did that year as well, outside of TNA, that despite all that, WWE still beat them. And I know some people might say, there's no way TNA had the better product. Well, that's a debate that is a debatable topic, if you will, because some people would say they did have the better product, that they weren't scripted as much, as WWE, that they were willing to go outside the box. And a lot of people have touted that when Hogan was there, despite the temporary switch to Monday nights and then back to Thursdays, the overall product was better. But when they went up against the likes of Raw, despite having that better product, per se, they basically ended up losing, and they lost in a big way. Which is why, when you think about it, the same could be said for AEW. Tony Khan realizes this, I should say, being a fan himself, watching wrestling, all kinds of wrestling, mind you. Tony Khan realizes, at the end of the day that, hey, my company has all this momentum, I have the better product, people, are watching my shows on TBS and TNT by the droves, the numbers are showing that, but Tony Khan also realizes that despite having that momentum, if he attempted to go up against Raw on Monday nights or straight up with Smackdown on Friday nights, he'd get annihilated. He would. And there's no getting around that, that fact or that reality. So, when you hear fans ask, or point out the fact that, hey, AEW has the better product, viewership would be through the roof for them if they went up against Raw and SmackDown. They would beat Raw and SmackDown. What these fans have to understand is that, yes, on paper, it does show that, without a shadow of a doubt, Dynamite and Rampage would beat SmackDown and Raw, maybe by a slight margin, but on paper it would show that, they have the advantage, that people would tune in, in droves to watch their product. But when you get down to the gist of it, when you get down to the statistics of it, hold on for a sec. I don't know what's going on. The birds are having a bit of a field day out there. But like I said, when you get down to the gist of it, when you get down to the statistics about it, like I said, despite on paper the fact that it would show, that Dynamite and Rampage, without a shadow of a doubt, would probably by a slight margin, as I was saying before I got up to shut the window, could indeed beat, Raw and SmackDown. That at the end of the reality is one, even if it looks good on paper, doesn't mean the execution, live and in color would reflect that. There's no way. There's no way it would reflect that whatsoever. I mean, let's look at it this way. There's a lot of things that on paper sound good and look good, but the overall execution of what you put on paper, as a result, is a different story. So, so just because on paper it looks like, Dynamite and Rampage would beat Raw and SmackDown, uncontested or just slightly by a margin, doesn't mean it would result in the same way if it actually happened. And that is why, despite a lot of fans wanting this to happen, Tony Khan will not make it happen. I mean, even if Tony wanted to attempt it himself, he knows as a businessman it's not a smart move. And he's got people that would give him pretty much advice on not to do that. I mean, Tony Khan, you can't tell me right now, isn't thinking and pondering, with, running AEW, I gotta find a way to, I gotta find a way to eventually move it to Monday nights because I want to compete. I want to go up against Raw. Or when it comes to Rampage, I gotta come up with some kind of solution that allows me to move Rampage and expand to 2 hours against Smackdown on Friday nights. You can't tell me that he's not considering that on a daily basis, but yet when he brings it up, maybe during the meetings, there's a lot of the people that he works with, some of the legends, Hall of Famers, if you will, that will give him the advice of not to do it because they know that if he did, he would be beat. That, like I said, despite having the better product, over Raw and SmackDown, at the end of the day, Raw and SmackDown would annihilate him. And that's why, honestly, despite as much as we want it to happen, despite as much as we would think, on paper and legitimately, Dynamite and Rampage have the better product, and in our minds that would basically put them above Raw and SmackDown, and thus they would beat them. At the end of the day, it's not going to matter because, again, between the two companies, WWE is more established in its base, with its fans and its viewers, that would outdo Rampage even by slightly. Not just Rampage, but Dynamite, both shows, I should say, of AEW, if not by slightly. It would do that. Because, the fact that, WWE could have a crappy product. They could have a crappy 3-hour Raw. They could have a crappy 2-hour SmackDown to coincide with it. And if Tony Khan decided to go up against those crappy editions of Raw and SmackDown, everybody, despite the fact that, hey, at the end of the day, or at the end of the night, on both nights I should say, AEW could have the superior product, the viewership numbers, the ratings would reflect differently, and the viewership numbers and ratings would be in favor, if not slightly, towards WWE. They would be in favor of, Raw and SmackDown, if not by slightly, despite them having the crappier product. And that is why Tony Khan, has yet to, basically make the move. This is why he has yet to, give in to basically pressure. I mean, when you hear the likes of Eric Bischoff and others saying, hey, you can't come out and tout the fact that, oh, my viewership number beat Raw's viewership numbers in these certain demographics and this is why he's not falling into peer pressure just yet when it comes to Bischoff, the likes of a Bischoff or a Bully Ray or a Booker T or whoever, coming out and saying, hey, it's one thing to tout and tweet of how, your ratings, your demo numbers were better than WWE's on Monday and Fridays. It's one thing to celebrate that and consider yourself as competition. It's another to actually compete. And it's because of, the likes of Bischoff and Booker T and Bully Ray and many, pointing this out that Tony Khan, give him credit, he doesn't fall into it. Because he could easily do that. He could easily say, you know what? I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to prove them wrong. Get on the phone. Hello, Turner Networks. I want to move Dynamite to Monday nights, and I want to move Rampage a few hours ahead to go head-to-head with SmackDown and expand it to 2 hours because I want to prove we have the better product. Beep. He could do that. If he wanted to fall into the peer pressure, he could do that. But he's not. He's not falling into that peer pressure because he knows if he allows himself to, that, like I said, on paper, he might have the better product. On paper, it would look like his shows head-to-head would beat Raw and SmackDown. But at the end of the day, despite having the better product, the viewership numbers and the ratings numbers would be in favor of WWE, if by a slight margin, if not more so. And that's why he's not falling into the criticisms that he gets from the likes of Bischoff, Booker T, Bully Ray, and others that say, hey, it's one thing to be happy about these numbers and saying that you are competition. It's another to prove it. And that's why he's not falling into that right now. Got to give him mad respect for that. He's not falling into it because he knows that if he does, that basically what a lot of people are saying would happen, if he did go head-to-head, would become a reality. And that's why he's not doing it. He might tease it. He might, go head-to-head by at least 15, 30 minutes, like he did about a couple months ago with Rampage against SmackDown, and that's fine. But he realizes that if he truly does go head-to-head, there's a good chance that, even by a slight margin, he would lose. Despite having a more better product, he could end up losing to a more crappier product, showcased by WWE. And he realizes that. He knows that. So, despite the fact that at the end of the day, and a lot of fans, not just AEW fans, but overall wrestling fans in general, that at the end of the day, despite them all saying AEW has the better product, and that from a head-to-head standpoint could beat WWE at its own game, at the end, when you get down to it, despite that's all, good, good analogy, if you will, great, good things to point out and pretty much say, hey, this is the evidence that proves it. At the when it gets down to being said and done, WWE, unfortunately, even by a slight margin, would beat them if they decided to go head to head, and that's why Tony Khan's not doing it. That is why Tony Khan has yet to do it, because, like I said, despite the likes of an Eric Bischoff, a Vince Russo, a Booker T, a Bully Ray, despite them saying, hey, it's one thing to be proud of this and say you are better than WWE competitive-wise, it's another to prove it. This is why Tony Khan's not falling into that trap, because he knows if he does, he's pretty much putting one foot into a grave, being set up for AEW, and he doesn't want that. He does not want that, period. So, for anybody that's always curious, in my opinion, from my point of view, for anybody that's curious as to why Tony Khan won't go head-to-head despite, in their minds, having the better product, it's because despite having the better product and on paper looking like he would beat, Raw and SmackDown head-to-head, at the end of the day, the reality is Tony Khan realizes that if he does it, he's the one that's going to be eating shit, excuse my language, God, he's going to be eating shit and spitting out feathers for a week due to the fact that he tried to do something thinking he had the better product and he ends up failing. Basically, it would come back to bite him in the ass, and he doesn't want that to happen. And the other reason is because he doesn't want himself to fall into that pressure, peer pressure, if you will, that he's getting from the criticisms, like I said, of those that I mentioned, that say, hey, it's one thing to be proud of, these numbers and saying you are competition, competitive-wise, to WWE, but it's another to prove it. I got to give him credit, like I said, mad respect for not falling into that just yet, because if he does, because if he did, and if not does eventually, it could be, it could be a very bad move. Now, I'm not saying that when he does make that decision that it won't be, a success for him, because I think if there's anything people would credit Tony Khan with being, is a patient man. He's patient. And if he's patient enough, to do make certain moves, I should say, not just signing talent, but to do this and that, then I think he's patient enough to make sure that he wants to, get a more established, more well-rounded, established audience, viewership, if you will, behind him, so that when he does decide to attempt to go head-to-head, that he'll have the viewership and the audience to back him up and help him in his first initial night, if not afterwards, succeed in beating Raw and SmackDown in the ratings and viewership. From a head-to-head standpoint. And that's basically, to me, when he would finally, basically, that's when he would finally, say, hey, give me the ball and let me run for the goal. That's when he'll do it. When he has a more well-rounded, established viewership and audience that will follow him onto the new nights and help him get that slight edge, if not more of an edge, over Raw and SmackDown. That is why he's yet to do it. One, he doesn't want to fall into the criticism and peer pressure, if you will, but also he's being patient in biding his time. That's why. Again, I'm not saying he won't do it, but he's waiting. He's biding his time, and he's waiting. That's why. Eventually, we are going to get it. I'm not going to deny that. Eventually, we are going to get Dynamite versus Raw, Rampage versus SmackDown. There is no doubt. There's no hiding it. But it's all about patience, and it's all about biding time. Because if he falls into that peer pressure of criticism he gets right now, and tries to attempt it, despite having a more superior product in the eyes of a lot of folks, going against a more semi-average, if not crappy product in the eyes of some folks, he knows that slightly average, more crappier product would beat his more superior product in the viewership and ratings. So in conclusion, and I know this may not make sense to a lot of people because it sounds like I was just rambling, I do apologize, but at the conclusion of the day, he might have the more superior product, his numbers might be more positive, but going head-to-head, he would still lose. And that's why he's not doing it. And eventually when he does, and I believe we are going to get it, he's biding his time. He's waiting. He wants to continue building up his audience, make it well-rounded, all the way. He wants to cover every checkpoint. And when the time is right, he feels when he feels the time is appropriate to make the announcement, that's when he'll do it. But he's waiting till all the pieces from a viewership audience standpoint is in place. But what do you guys think? Do you think Tony Khan will eventually go head-to-head with Raw and SmackDown with his shows? I think he will. But do you agree with the fact that I pointed out, from my opinion, that the reason he's not doing it now is because he knows that despite having a more superior product in the eyes of a lot of folks, and on paper looking like he'd be able to beat them head-to-head, that he realizes at the end of the day that having a more superior product could still get beat, if not slightly, if not more so, by a more semi-average, crappier product by the opposition. What are your thoughts? Comment below. Live chat during the premiere. Live super chats and super stickers are open and would be appreciated during the live chat of the premiere. Also check me out at my Teespring store. Also check me out at BW Rosas on Vimeo. Also check me out at BW Rosas Discussions, all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. Also check me out at Venmo at Brian-Warmer-2. And also check me out at patreon.com/BWRosas to help support me there with a $1 or $3 tier. But again, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think eventually we will see a head-to-head deal? I do. But do you think the reason he's not doing it now is because he knows, despite having a better product, he'd still get beat? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'm out. And the live chat as well, and I'm out.